Hello and welcome to another video lesson about conditional statements in Python. So in the past two videos, we covered the simple if statement. So the if statement that allows you to run a block of code if a certain condition is true. We talked about if else statements. So when we want a different code to run depending on whether the condition is true or false. And in this video lesson, we're going to go over if you have more than two conditions to check. And in that case, we're going to use the keyword elif, which is shorthand of else if. So let me explain what I mean by getting to the video lesson. So first, I want to create a variable called score, and I want the user to enter a score, right? Like a score, an integer score. And this is going to take a string. So whatever the user types into the console, when it gets it back, it's going to be a string. So I need to cast that. I need to put int around that whole thing to cast whatever the user puts as an integer. So I want whatever the input is, this part's going to be a string. It's going to get a string. I want this to be casted into an integer. So, and we went over that over previous lessons. I just think that it's important to reiterate some of these points because they're new to you, right? They're new to you. You're just learning. And let's go ahead and start with if, right? So we're going to do some kind of if. So we're getting scores. So what we want to do, what we want this to look like, is we want a system that checks if the user got an A, if the user got a B, if the user got a C, a D, or an F. And to do that, we're going to say if score, and then what's the score need to be? It needs to be greater than or equal to 90 exactly to get an A. So we're going to print A. So if the score, if whatever this user put in, if this string that was eventually casted to this integer, if it's greater than or equal to 90, we're going to print that they got an A. Okay, and then we press enter and backspace elif. So elif stands for else if. So else if the score is greater than or equal to 80, we're going to print B. So notice that there's a condition after elif. Elif checks an additional condition. If starts the condition, elif is another one. So if goes first, this part goes first. First we check if score is greater than or equal to 90. Then if that's not true, okay, let's check the next one. Elif score is greater than or equal to 80, is that true? And then if that's not true, we go to the next one. If score greater than or equal to 70, print C. Then we go to the next one. And each of these keeps going until we get to the condition that's true, or if we get to an else. So if none of the conditions are true, we do else. But let me show you what I mean by coding it. Score greater than or equal to 60 is a D. And then finally, for everything else, so if it's not greater than or equal to 90, if it's not greater than or equal to 80, not greater than or equal to 70, not greater than or equal to 60, so for any other value, we're going to print F. And you're going to avoid F's in this class by doing all your exams and all your quizzes. Okay, so I'm going to run this code and we're going to check out what this looks like. So I'm going to run it, enter an integer score, and I'm going to enter 85, and I press enter, and I get B. So let's look at the code. Let's see what's happening here. Let me make this a little smaller so we can see the whole thing. Okay, so we get the score from the user. The user put 85. if the score, so if 85 is greater than or equal to 90, we're going to print A. Is that true? No. So we go to the next one. So what we do is we don't do anything here. The statements that are underneath this if, we only run it if that condition was true. If it's not, then we skip to the next elif. Okay, we skip. So elif score, which was 85, is greater than or equal to 80. So 85 is greater than or equal to 80. So then print B. So this statement gets run. And then we jump out, we stop. So as soon as we get to a condition that's true, we don't run the rest of the code after that. We already found what we wanted. We wanted to see if score was greater than or equal to some value. It happened. That's it. So to drive this point home, I'm going to print that is your grade. I'll put like a sentence here. So this is not part of the conditional statement. And I'm going to put a space here so that I emphasize that. This is what happens after all of this runs. This will run. This will run. So I want to explain this. How do I explain this? Your conditional statements are something that check for a condition. And as soon as you hit it, you no longer need to check for anything else. You've hit what you wanted. And so we move on. And this print is not indented underneath the else. It's no longer indented. It's the same level as this if. And it doesn't start with an if or an elif itself. So what happens? It's just the rest of our code. It gets run. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to run. And I'm going to enter, let's enter a bad score, like 20. Okay. So I'm going to press enter. And what happens is I get this else because we checked. So is score greater than or equal to 90? No. Okay. Go to the next one. Elif score greater than or equal to 80? No. Go to the next one and the next one until we get to else. And else covers everything else. So anything else, even if the user somehow was able to put in a string and it wasn't an integer type, this else is going to run because, you know, it's anything other than an integer 90, an integer 80, an integer 70, an integer 60, anything else. So in this case, 20 is not greater than any of these values, so else gets ran. And then we move on. We are done with this conditional statement, and whatever, if we have more code underneath, then that continues. So that's how these, that's how multiple conditions work. So to reiterate, if you have more than 2 conditions to check, use elif to specify the additional conditions. And elif needs a condition. Else doesn't need a condition. It's just everything else. And that's going to conclude this video lesson. Go ahead and practice this before you move on to the next video. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day.